Great. Thanks, Megan. Meg, thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome. And thank you for attending today's press conference for our new report, The Threat of Landfill Leachate to Drinking Water in the Hudson and Mohawk Rivers. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. So my name is Rebecca Martin, and I'm the project manager of this project as part of the Hudson and Mohawk River Leachate Collective. Just a little housekeeping today. So as you know, this press conference is being recorded today, and I believe we'll stop recording during the question and answer period. We'll be providing actions and next steps at the end of our presentation to help you to row with us and to make some big changes in New York State in the new year and going forward. Followed by a question and answer period to answer any of your questions. We look forward to that. If you have them now, if you have them later. And I want to thank Megan Fons of Berlin Rosen for bringing us all together today. Next slide. So just a little context. In the spring of 2023, freshwater ecologist Jen Epstein and I began meeting weekly via Zoom. Jen and I had met and worked together in the water quality program at Hudson Riverkeeper for nearly 5 years before she left the organization and I transitioned to independent consulting. So our regular meetings were not just about staying connected, but we were determined to continue to work together. With the freedom to explore any issue, we focused on a shared concern, landfill leachate, or liquid waste, or garbage water, being processed by municipal wastewater treatment plants that discharged into the Hudson and Mohawk Rivers. These rivers are drinking water sources for approximately 368,000 people, including communities that disproportionately bear the brunt of environmental harm. So after months of dedicated work, and I should actually say that at the time, Jen and her family moved to Bolivia, which is why our Zoom calls were required. We weren't able to see each other in person, but we were determined to see each other every week. So after months of dedicated work, and it's been 19 months of work of this team, and with the invaluable support from many, including Monica Mercola, who's the former staff attorney at Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, peer.org, Captain John Lipscomb, who's our technical advisor, the PACE Environmental Litigation Clinic, who provided legal research for this project, and the Good Work Institute, who's our fiscal sponsor. So together we're proud to share our findings with you today. This release is particularly meaningful to us as it follows the 50th anniversary of the Safe Drinking Water Act that was celebrated yesterday, December the 16th. So as we look ahead to the next 50 years, we've got to end these outdated and harmful practices that continue to jeopardize our precious water supplies. Next. So I'm going to take a moment here to share this really important phrase that Jen and I heard from Captain John Lipscomb, a powerful warning that he told to us very early on in this work, that industrial waste is not gone from our rivers, it's just hidden. And pointing to the regulatory gaps that allow the Hudson and Mohawk Rivers to be polluted by municipal and industrial landfill leachate. The toxic liquid, as we said, formed as water percolates through landfills. That's leachate. This regulatory failure, which we refer to as the Leachate Loophole, exposes weaknesses across multiple environmental laws, including those governing solid waste, surface water, and drinking water, and leaves our rivers and drinking water sources vulnerable to contamination. Next slide. So I'm pleased to introduce my colleague and friend, Jen Epstein, who is the GIS analyst and lead writer for the Hudson and Mohawk River Leachate Collective, who's going to tell you more about our report. Jen is a freshwater ecologist, a geospatial scientist, and water quality advocate who combines data and policy analysis to untangle complex problems. She is particularly interested in how stormwater, drinking water, and wastewater infrastructure systems connect with natural ecosystems. Her past work includes building and managing Riverkeeper's community-based water quality monitoring program, where we were there together. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen Epstein.
Good morning, everyone. As Rebecca mentioned, the leachate loophole is the term that we've used to describe the reason that toxic leachate that would not be allowed to be released directly from landfills is allowed to pass through wastewater treatment plants into rivers that are used as drinking water sources. Broadly speaking, many different industrial waste streams flow into municipal wastewater treatment plants. So we, as a project team, were generally aware that this practice of landfill leachate disposal was occurring, but we were also aware that the scope and scale hadn't yet been summarized for the public. So the goal of the project that we're talking about today is to provide information so that communities, especially those using the Hudson River Estuary and the Mohawk Rivers for drinking water, can become aware of how landfill leachate is handled for disposal and can use this information to protect their drinking water sources. So this report focuses on the area that is shown here, the portions of the Mohawk River and Hudson River Estuary used as drinking water supplies. Roughly east of Schenectady, to where the Mohawk joins the Hudson River near Troy, and then south to Poughkeepsie. So we've obtained and mapped data about landfill leachate disposal in this region, and we've detailed how environmental regulations are failing to protect rivers from leachate pollution. Our number one goal in doing this is to support discussions needed to develop better systems. Our work shows that in this project area, 89 million gallons of landfill leachate pass through municipal wastewater treatment plants into surface waters each year. So how does this loophole work? As water percolates through the material in a landfill, it picks up a mixture of substances from the decomposing waste, including polluting chemicals such as PFAS. Modern landfills are required to take extensive measures to contain this liquid leachate because it's known to be toxic. That's been required since the 1970s under the Resource Recovery and Conservation Act, RCRA. However, once the leachate is collected, the standard practice is to send it either by pipe or by truck to a municipal wastewater treatment plant for disposal. And that standard practice also began about 40 years ago. Municipal wastewater treatment plants are regulated under the Clean Water Act through speedies permits. Municipal wastewater treatment plants are designed and equipped to treat human waste. They're not equipped to remove or break down the types of synthetic chemicals that are found in landfill leachate, nor are they required to do so. The speedies permits limit conventional indicators of human waste, not the long list of synthetic chemicals that landfills are required to contain. So this is the first part of the loophole. As a result, polluted leachate passes through the wastewater treatment plants into the Hudson and Mohawk Rivers in the very same areas that are used as drinking water sources. The burden of treating this water so that it is safe to drink falls to the drinking water treatment plants under the Safe Drinking Water Act, which turned 50 yesterday. So you can see that we have a system that controls the release of certain chemicals from landfills, only to disperse them back into the environment, and then to require communities who use these rivers for drinking water to clean up the mess. The three regulatory frameworks that are supposed to protect water at each step of this process are not aligned in terms of the chemicals they regulate. And they allow this illogical practice of leachate disposal at municipal wastewater treatment plants. So here on this slide, you see a breakdown of how these 89 million gallons of landfill leachate are the sources and how they're distributed into the Hudson and Mohawk Rivers. And you see also, as Rebecca said, hundreds of thousands of people using these waters as drinking water sources. This system does not exist because it's the optimal way of doing things. It came into existence 40 years ago because it was based on assumptions that polluting chemicals are safe at low concentrations and that they will break down rapidly in the environment. Recent science research and recent experience show that these assumptions are incorrect, but our regulations have not kept pace. So when we throw stuff away, it doesn't disappear. What we put on the land comes back to the water. As I said earlier, we wanted to do this work in order to help communities find better systems, better ways. Wastewater operators have long seen this leachate handling as part of their duty, as part of their civic responsibility. And they're accepting this waste in compliance with their operating permits. But it is not a good practice. The technology to treat landfill leachate on site at landfills is available, and landfills do use it when communities demand it. So the goal of this project and our hope is to provide the information that will support communities in doing this.
Thank you, Jen. All right, next. So it's with great pleasure that I can introduce our colleague, Captain John Lipscomb. Captain John became Riverkeeper's boat captain in 2000. Since then, John has been patrolling the Hudson for Riverkeeper aboard the R. Ian Fletcher boat we've all been on, happily, a 36-foot Chesapeake Bay-style wooden vessel. From April into December, every year he traveled approximately 4,000 to 5,000 nautical miles between New York Harbor, Rome on the Mohawk, and Fort Edwards on the Upper Hudson, searching out and deterring polluters, monitoring tributaries and waterfront facilities, conducting a sampling program to measure fecal contamination, and supporting other scientific studies, and taking regional decision makers and media out on the river so that the river had a chance to advocate for itself. We're honored and fortunate to have John as our technical advisor for this project. Captain John.
Thank you, Rebecca, and good morning, everybody. I believe there you go. So big picture first, from my point of view, is in my 24 years working for Riverkeeper, we have gone after every kind of polluter we could find, large and small, from Exxon down to private properties along the waterways. And a trend, a change that I perceive is that we've happily gone away, moved beyond the days of individual bad guy polluters like, GE and Exxon, etc. And now, in fact, the polluter is our society. So in New York City and in the Capital District, vast amounts of sewage are overflowed into the rivers. And now we're looking at this leachate question. So society is the polluter now. And so it's society's job to fix the problem. For me, this all started with this property, the Croton landfill. I started with Riverkeeper in 2000, but in 1985, Riverkeeper was involved and there was a federal lawsuit against the landfill for directly discharging leachate into the Hudson. Went to court, and the fix determined at the time was that the discharges were halted. Trucks began to I'm reading a quote from an old publication. Discharges were halted. Trucks began to regularly pick up the leachate and dispose of it at treatment plants. And so you can see that the problem that we're looking to address started that far back. Now, Riverkeeper failed to follow the pollution. We read treatment plants and we assumed good things, and we should not have, because it turns out treatment plants are wastewater treatment plants that are not designed to deal with leachate. We considered it case closed. We should have followed the pollution back then. In 2009, they got a permit to, instead of putting it in trucks, to put it in a sewer pipe that runs from the Croton landfill down through Ossining to the Westchester County-owned sewer plant in Ossining, and it's discharged straight in the river. So I'm really delighted that this team is taking on this leachate issue. We don't accept pollution, whether it's discharged illegally or legally, as in this case. And the basic issue is 89 million gallons of some of the worst polluted water imaginable being discharged into the Hudson and our drinking water sources. This is pollution that's too toxic to discharge directly under the Clean Water Act. So the sleight of hand that's happening here is that it's being blended with partially treated sewage and then discharged into the rivers anyway. So in the end, the river gets it all. I'm convinced that once the public is aware of this practice, it will call for it to stop. The public will call for this practice to stop. I have to acknowledge that I'm gratified to see that the DEC is indicating that they're interested in revisiting this issue. And so the time is right. Time is now. We have to stop leachate discharge into our waterways. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So next, I'm pleased to introduce Yvonne Taylor, who's a co-founder of Seneca Lake Guardian and one of our important coalition partners. Seneca Lake Guardian was conceived by Yvonne Taylor and Joseph Campbell, founders of Gas Free Seneca, and Mary Ann Kowalski, Seneca Lake Pure Water's board member, when the need for active involvement in the numerous threats to Seneca Lake became apparent. Seneca Lake Guardian is a Waterkeeper affiliate, connecting them to the largest and fastest growing nonprofit solely focused on clean water, uniting more than 300 Waterkeeper organizations and affiliates that are on the front lines of the global water crisis, patrolling and protecting more than 2.5 million square miles of rivers, lakes, and coastal waterways on 6 continents, where the goal is drinkable, fishable, swimmable, water everywhere. Yvonne lives on the east side of Seneca Lake, on the land that has been in her family for generations, and we're very happy that Yvonne could join us today. Welcome, Yvonne.
Good morning, and thank you for your excellent work, Rebecca, Jennifer, and John. As Rebecca said, I am the co-founder and principal of Seneca Lake Guardian, an organization dedicated to preserving and protecting the health of the Finger Lakes region. And we're leading the fight to shut down Seneca Meadows, the state's largest landfill that is located in Seneca Falls, New York. This extremely well-researched report reveals a devastating truth about landfill leachate contaminating water sources in the Mohawk and Hudson rivers. But it exemplifies a more endemic problem across New York State. It's a stark reminder of the dangers posed by our throwaway culture and the urgent need for action. Here in New York, Seneca Meadows represents the worst of these dangers. Every year, nearly 60 million gallons of toxic leachate, contaminated with PFAS and other hazardous chemicals, are trucked across the state, polluting waterways, including the Mohawk and Hudson rivers. These chemicals, known as forever chemicals, persist in our environment, threatening our health, our ecosystems, and our future. In 2023, the city of Amsterdam began accepting leachate from Seneca Meadows. In 1 month, the city's wastewater treatment plant discharged 414,000 gallons of leachate from the Seneca Meadows landfill into the Mohawk River upstream of the Great Flats aquifer and surface water intakes. The solutions are clear. The DEC must act now to ensure new regulations for on-site treatment of landfill leachate at landfills and prevent contamination from spreading rather than trucking it to unsuspecting communities. But we need to think even bigger, eliminating the use of PFAS chemicals in products and transitioning to a zero-waste circular economy where landfills are a last resort is the only way to truly protect our water, air, and communities. The fight is personal for those of us in Seneca Falls, where we live with the stench, the truck traffic, and the degraded air quality caused by this towering 30-story mountain of garbage that is being collected from all over the state. And while we are bearing the burden of the entire state's trash, this is not just a Finger Lakes problem. It's a problem for all of us. Toxic water from Seneca Meadows doesn't stop at the landfill's border. Communities across New York, New Jersey, and beyond are being poisoned by the landfill's output. That's why we're calling on New York, all New Yorkers, to stand with us. Join us in demanding a sustainable future for New York by closing Seneca Meadows when its permit expires in 2025 and calling on the DEC to adopt new regulations for on-site treatment of leachate at landfills. Together, we can protect our drinking water, our health, and our shared environment for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Powerful. Great. So now we're at the point of our presentation where we're going to talk about actions. First, we have a website, www.leachateloophole.org, that hosts all of our materials, the report, interactive maps, resources, and actions. And what we're in the midst of working on this project, the DEC announced that they were opening a rulemaking or new regulations for on-site treatment of leachate and disposal at landfills. And so we're happy to be at a point where we can help the public understand this problem well enough to really take advantage of the public comment period when it opens. So we want to work together to make these big changes in New York State next year and beyond. We want to help municipalities. We want to help drinking water plants. We want to protect rivers. We want to protect communities. We want to protect the environment and public health, all of those things together. And so if you visit our website, there's an action page, and there you'll find a couple of links. We're going to do a deeper dive on the report in the new year in January. We're offering 2 webinars, one at noon, one at 6 p.m., and you can register now to attend. We also have an action right now that we can all do, which is to urge the DEC to adopt new regulations for on-site treatment and disposal of leachate from landfills. They were promising the opening of the rulemaking in 2023, and then again in 2024, and we're waiting for that to occur so that we can get to work and get as many public comments as possible to help to make the changes that need to be made. And we also hope that the rulemaking process will begin after the holidays. And we're asking for a 90-day public comment period. So you can help us with that by visiting our website, www.leachateloophole.org. Yeah, next slide, please. And so I'm going to just wrap it up. I found an image from a New York State source of leachate that's contained at the Fresh Kills landfill in Staten Island that's now closed. The landfill is closed. And it's a good image here for us to ponder about what leachate looks like and what it is and where it's going, and being mindful of how we're treating our waste and thinking through into the future how we can better manage our waste And as municipal and industrial landfill leachate must remain at the landfill. And without proper on-site treatment, it should never be permitted to leave the site and enter into our environment or our drinking water supplies. Next slide. So that does it for us. I'm going to pause and turn it over now to Berlin Rosen, who will be facilitating any Q&A today. Thank you so much for coming and for your time, and take action with us. Thank you.
All right. It looks like we have one question in the chat about Seneca Meadows on-site leachate treatment system. Yvonne, if you want to respond to that. There's another question about if you close a landfill, what is the plan for where all of that trash will go?
You're on mute, Yvonne.
These are great questions. And first I'll answer the on-site leachate treatment at the landfill. Seneca Meadows does have a reverse osmosis system on site, but it only treats less than 1/5 of the total nearly 60 million gallons of PFAS-laden leachate that it produces. And that amount of the leachate that's treated is the stuff that goes to our local community wastewater treatment facility. It was the agreement that the landfill made with us locally, but it does nothing to protect other New Yorkers across the state from receiving untreated leachate. The second question is the question that the landfill operators would like you asking. If we don't And that is the wrong question to be asking in our view. In our view, the question to be asking is, how can we implement a statewide zero waste circular economy where we don't produce as much waste in the first place? We have robust statewide composting and recycling. We have a robust reuse program that diverts waste, the waste stream, or I'll even call it materials from the waste stream, because it's usable, viable materials that are now currently being thrown on a mountain of garbage. And so we have the solutions. They exist. As a matter of fact, the state itself released its own solid waste management plan in December of last year that is a roadmap to getting us toward this zero waste circular economy. All we need to do is create the political capital to implement it, and we will be able to close the landfill on time.
I just want to add one thing to that, Yvonne, to help the public with resources on our website under resources. We did share the Zero Waste Hierarchy, which is a really great website that talks a lot about how to implement something like that we learned from our friend Mike Ewall at Energy Justice Network and through the Zero Waste Coalition of New York, who's doing great work on that as well. So there are some resources on our website. That's a great starting point to be thinking about all of the arms of the octopus here. So thanks, Yvonne.
Great. We also have a question about if there is a budget that is going to be a part of this ask for the DEC and what new infrastructure requirements might look like for on-site filtration.
Yeah, great question. I can answer that in one way about what would be needed in order to support new regulations. So that's something that we hope that the DEC will be looking at and discussing in the new year, and we really need to open this rulemaking process so we can start to have those conversations and look at the regulations that are being proposed to know. But one thing that I think is an interesting data point that I've just learned about, so last Wednesday on December the 4th, just thinking about costs, the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton sued chemical manufacturers, DuPont and 3M for failing to disclose health risks and environmental harms related to their marketing of products that contain PFAS, also known as forever chemicals. I'm sure landfill operators and operators of sewage treatment plants would have benefited from receiving accurate information about PFAS decades ago. This lawsuit was filed in U.S. Northern District Court in Texas. And today we could urge New York Attorney General Letitia James, who's been on the forefront of environmental protection litigation, to consider a similar suit so that the polluters are held accountable for their PFAS pollution, much of which is being sent directly into our streams and rivers from landfill leachate and other sources. So that's what I'd like to say about that, at least part of what needs to be said. Jen or John, do you have anything to add?
I would add to that drinking water treatment plants are having to pay the cost of cleaning up the water before providing it to consumers. So it's not as if this cost isn't already being borne somewhere. The question is whether it's being borne in the right place.
I'll add just another note. So Jen's point is right on. Two things. One is that the drinking water plants do not have the technology necessarily to fully treat or remove the hazardous materials in leachate. They're not even aware what's in the leachate. So before you're going to design equipment to remove certain contaminants, you have to know what they are. Second, very important point is that the humans who drink water from the river are one user. All the creatures that live in the river their entire lives, that have to live in this disgusting soup, are also stakeholders, but they can't speak today. We speak for them. So treating it at the drinking water intake plants helps that, potentially partially helps the drinking water end user. But eliminating the discharge of leachate into our waterways helps everyone, including all the creatures that must live in the river because they can't go anywhere else.
Great.
It's not okay. It's not, we should just, there's always the discussion on right away on how much is it going to cost. And that's a very important question. But that's the DEC's question to answer. They have access to the technologies that are available for the landfills. They will have to work with the landfills. But as a society, we can't say that it's okay to pollute our rivers with this nasty, nasty toxic water because it's cheaper. We can't do that as a society. That's the reason we're in trouble now, globally. We cannot, as a society, say, well, it's cheaper, so let's continue doing it.
Thank you. We also have a question about what you think the regulations regarding on-site treatment should look like.
Well, we're hoping that going forward with new regulations that leachate will not leave the landfill. And if it does, that it's treated to remove all or most toxic chemicals before it's sent out into the environment. That's what we're hoping these regulations are going to say generally. It's a lot of detail, but we look forward to seeing what the DEC puts on the table and then working with that, reviewing it and working to provide insights and make changes at that time. We need to see what the regulations say. That's the first step. We can't influence that. The DEC is holding on to that tight to the chest, so we're waiting for that to be released, and then we'll go from there.
And I'll add that this group is a watchdog group. We're pointing out a problem that has to be solved. We are not environmental engineers specializing in wastewater treatment. That's what the state has. That's what the landfill has as a contractor, environmental engineers. So the watchdog's job is to point out the problem, and it's the regulator's job to design the technology.
Thank you. Yvonne touched on this, but can you speak to a plan to stop the manufacturing of PFAS and corporate responsibility for this forever chemical?
Jen, do you want to talk about that a little bit? The precautionary principle, just the ideas that or the thinking on that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that question for me?
Yes, the question is about stopping the manufacturing of PFAS and what corporate responsibility for this forever chemical can look like.
So we used in our work, we used the term emerging contaminants, which is it's a broad term and unfortunately can be a confusing one, but it basically means chemicals that are unregulated and that are suspected or known to be harmful to living beings. EPA keeps a list of chemicals that are used in manufacturing and commerce in the United States, and there are 86,000 chemicals on that list. Very few of them are regulated, whether that's in surface water or drinking water. And many of these are chemicals that are fossil fuel based, that are used in industrial processes, that are used in commercial goods for like plasticizers or flame retardants. They include chemicals that disrupt endocrine systems that are carcinogenic. Not all of them are, but the point is that they don't get fully studied, and the studies that are done don't get fully published before chemicals are approved for use in commerce and then therefore released into the environment. These also are not all new chemicals. PFAS, which we've touched upon and which we focused on in the report, are one example. And we used that example because they are currently receiving a lot of attention, and therefore there's data available about them. So we have a system where corporations are permitted to invent and then manufacture substances that we don't know very much about, rather than a system which would be better protective of human health and of the environment, in which we required companies to first demonstrate that chemicals are safe before we allow them into manufacturing, and also to use chemical engineering principles that produce safer chemicals, right? So that's where the responsibility should lie. We shouldn't have corporations profiting from selling a bunch of stuff that is poisoning our environment and then leaving municipalities to foot the bill for cleaning it up. And that's what the precautionary principle points to, is if we suspect or know that there is potential for harm, we use a strategy that's protective rather than one that's reactive.
And that shifts the burden to the
point of manufacture.
right.
Yeah. Rather than the end.
Rather on the public who is potentially poisoned and having to prove that the chemical that they've ingested is harmful.
Thank you, Jen. Our next question is there data from treatment facilities on the quantity of PFAS prior to and post discharge into the Mohawk and Hudson rivers?
For wastewater treatment facilities, we did not find any, no. I don't believe there's any right now. I think New York may be teed up to require that soon, but we didn't have that. We did not find that.
Got it. And other than PFAS, can you talk about the other chemicals that are being transferred into the river through this loophole?
Yeah, so like I said, we focused on PFAS because it has been recently regulated, but it's one little piece of a much larger universe of synthetic chemicals that are circulating through the environment. New ones are invented every day, and that in the case of PFAS have been around for decades, but are not well studied, are not fully regulated. The examples would be chemicals that are used in manufacturing processes as solvents or dyes, or industrial processes, chemicals that are used to give us non-stick items, stain-free items, nice flexible plastics that we use and then throw away, flame retardants. And many of these chemicals are based, they're fossil fuel based, and many of these chemicals, and some of them have been shown to be carcinogenic or to be endocrine disruptors. So they are sometimes also chemicals that do not break down rapidly in the environment. That's why PFAS have the nickname forever chemicals, because they stick around. They can cause impacts at very low concentrations. In the case of 2 of the PFAS chemicals that EPA recently regulated in drinking water, EPA set a numerical maximum, but also noted and indicated that the goal is for there to be none of them, because no safe concentrations have been determined for PFOA and PFOS. So we're talking about very broad class of chemical compounds that we should not be so reckless about.
Now I'll just piggyback on that. Sorry, John.
You go.
Real quick. One other chemical that we know is present in at least the leachate coming from Seneca Meadows is 1,4-dioxane. And evidently, it's my understanding that even with the reverse osmosis treatment, it does not remove the 1,4-dioxane chemicals from the leachate. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, so I believe the question was other stuff in the leachate, correct? So I'm not a scientist, but looking at literature here, preparing for today, I don't know if this will focus, but this is a 2 pages of EPA, 2 columns, 3 columns on this side of substances of concern, small print, hundreds of things you can't pronounce. In the Croton landfill permit, I'm going to read a subset of the compounds of concern: arsenic, barium, cadmium, chromium, cyanide, lead, mercury, oil and grease, phenol, selenium, silver, total toxic organics. Now I'm asking anyone listening, do you want any of that in your drinking water? Not just a little drop, that's all. Do you want any of it in your drinking water? I venture a guess the answer is no. Would you put any of these chemicals in your aquarium at home with your pet fish? No. So the list of toxics in leachate is virtually infinite because the landfills receive such a wide variety of waste. And that rainfall that percolates down through them is picking up a little bit from everything in that landfill. So it's an inconceivably polluted stream of water.
Thank you. What can local governments do to reject leachate from being accepted at their local sewer treatment plant?
We have a couple of examples that we talk about in the report. One was Seneca Falls, where Yvonne is, and another in Lowell, Massachusetts, for the turnkey landfill that was delivering quite a bit of leachate to go into the Merrimack River, where 500,000 people were relying on that river for their drinking water. And the public, very quickly, there was a Boston Globe article on a Thursday exposing the delivery of this leachate. And on Friday, there was a follow-up article, and the municipality stopped accepting the leachate. All of that is cited in our report. You can read those examples. I think it's as simple as community members raising the question, whether you see your name, your municipality in the report or not. Remember, this is a New York State issue. It's a national problem. It's an international problem. So we have resources for you on our website. If you don't know, you can locate your drinking water source with your annual water quality report. It'll lead you right to your superintendent of your drinking water. You can locate landfills that are active or inactive that might be near you to see whether or not, to check in on their management. You should call your mayor's supervisor in communities that are either accepting leachate to ask why, and to look and to see. I mean, small municipalities are accepting this stuff because they need money for their wastewater treatment plant budgets. But where else can the money come from? And what's the cost really of taking this stuff and distributing it throughout the environment and potentially causing harm to your neighbors? So I think we have to be sensitive and work with our municipalities, but we can tell them no more leachate. And why are we accepting it? And the list of things, and work with your municipality to solve those problems, to find money somewhere else, a couple $100,000. It's not small amounts, but we're talking pennies per gallon that are being charged for this. It's the cheapest way to manage pollution that I can think of. And so I would just start there, start local, talk to your municipal leaders, especially if you see your community in our map, in our interactive map or in our report, and ask them to stop accepting it. That's a short-term solution that we surmise at this time.
And Rebecca, you started to address this, but are wastewater treatment plants profiting from this process?
Yes. So leachate is delivered to municipal wastewater treatment plants for pennies per gallon, between a penny and 6 cents per gallon. And that money is used in their municipal, or rather their wastewater treatment plant budgets, their sewage budgets, to offset their yearly costs. You'll see, I mean, there are some municipalities, the amount of leachate is tremendous, and it's actually coming from their own municipal landfill, so they're not charging anything. 10 million gallons of leachate up in Albany, for Albany County, for example, correct me if I'm wrong, Jen, on that, but at 0 cents per gallon, because it's their landfill. So that is what's happening at the moment.
And that goes back to the question we had on how will a community end this practice. This is all by contract. So all a community has to do that has a drinking water intake or a sewage treatment plant that doesn't want to receive this anymore, just end the contract. It's as simple as that. Now, the problem is that that's not good enough. We don't want community A to say no more leachate for us, and then the landfill just goes to community D or C or E or F and sells it there, pays to have it disposed there. And so we need a statewide rule that requires leachate to be treated on site, disposed of on site, and not in our rivers, which are owned by the entire public.
Thank you. And can you remind us what region and communities are affected specifically by the research that you presented today?
I can get at this one. The region includes the parts of the Mohawk River and the Hudson River Estuary that are used as drinking water sources. So roughly speaking, we were looking at the region from Schenectady to the east, where the Mohawk River meets the Hudson River, and then south of there. And I have a list in front of me of the municipalities in this area where people consume water that comes from the Hudson and Mohawk Rivers. The municipalities are not all entirely served by these sources. These are just the municipalities that include people who drink from these sources. So for the Mohawk River, for surface water, it's the city of Cohoes, the town of Waterford, and the town and village of Colony. Drinking from the Great Flats Aquifer, it's the towns of Charleston, Ballston, Glenville, Niskayuna, Rotterdam, and the city of Schenectady, village of Scotia. Then we have in the Hudson River, the village of Green Island, which uses infiltration wells, which are influenced directly by the Hudson River. And then drinking Hudson River surface water are the towns of High Park, Lloyd, Esopus, Poughkeepsie, East Fishkill, city of Poughkeepsie, and the village of Rhinebeck. So again, not each of those towns, cities, villages is necessarily entirely served. The drinking water systems are fairly complicated. There's a lot of nuance and interconnection, but those are the municipalities where people live who are served by these drinking water sources, either directly or through purchase, and either as their sole source as blended water.
Thank you. And can you respond to if these new guidelines for treatment for leachate at landfills would help reduce PFAS pollution through other sources like burning exhaust from landfill gas or otherwise?
I'm sorry. Maybe you could rephrase that question. Or Rebecca, do you want to?
Yeah, so Bob, thanks for your question. Bob's saying that there's research that shows that burning exhaust of gases coming, Yvonne had to go to teach her class, so gases coming out of landfills does not remove PFAS, so burning exhaust of gases coming out of landfills does not remove PFAS, so it is going into the air. Do you know if new treatment for leachate at landfills will reduce this problem? So I don't know that, the answer to that, Bob. It's a great question. And that's what we hope that this report provokes, are lots and lots of good questions. John might have something to say.
I don't know either, but it's a super question, and it's exactly the kind of question we hope you'll ask the DEC when they open a rulemaking and make the regulator deal with this issue. That's exactly the kind of question we need.
Great. Less relevant to this report, but very timely. Could additional communities need to rely on the Hudson River for drinking water due to future drought conditions lowering reservoir levels?
I can answer that if you want, or Jen, you have that?
Go for it.
So,
Go ahead.
it's obviously unknown which community might decide in the future, perhaps after a period of drought, to connect to the Hudson with an intake. We can't predict that. But one thing we do know is that the city of New York has a backup plan in place and has for many, many, many years to withdraw Hudson River water at Chelsea if there was a drought sufficient in the Adirondacks to pose a drinking water problem for New York City. So it's conceivable that as climate changes, the city might start drawing water from the Hudson as well. And that's a pretty big community.
John, when you say Chelsea, just in case people aren't familiar and thinking we mean Chelsea downtown New York
Yeah,
City.
Chelsea is just north of Newburgh, south of Poughkeepsie. The idea was they placed it above the typical line of where salt ends and fresh begins in the estuary. So that's why it was located there. So yeah, there may be other communities, including New York City. You know, we work with a scientist at Lamont Doherty who studies through looking at seed casings and pollen in marshes, looks at periods of drought that happened since the last ice age, drought that lasted for decades and decades and decades. That's more severe droughts than we have in our recorded history. It's conceivable that those kind of droughts will happen again, and the Hudson River will be needed as a drinking water source for many more communities.
Thank you. Any other questions from our attendees? Oh, I see a question about when the recording of this press conference will be posted. Rebecca, do we plan to post this on the website?
We could, we haven't discussed it. Why don't we discuss it? What's definitely going to be available for the public are these webinars
Yeah.
in January at noon and at 6, and we will be recording and posting that. But we'll talk about posting this as well. Thanks for the question. And thanks for attending. I don't know who else is left, but we really appreciate you sticking around and asking more questions. We are happy to talk about this all day long. Maybe not today, Jen, who's jet lagged, but beyond
Happy
that.
might be taking it a little far.
we would be-
It's not a fun topic, right?
Well, the
It's
fun of it
gratifying
is
that people want to know about it. Yeah.
and to have a frame to be able to have these conversations right now,
Yeah.
which
Important.
is gratifying for sure.
Great. Well, with that, I think we can wrap. Thank you to all of our attendees and to our wonderful panelists. And I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.